You are listening to the Hiking Radio Network, where we talk the walk with shows by hikers about hikers for everybody.
Mighty Blue on the Appalachian Trail, the ultimate midlife crisis. Join Steve and his guests every week as he staggers from Georgia to Maine.
Hi guys, it's me again, Mighty Blue or Steve Adams, and you're listening to the Mighty Blue podcast, where we interview hikers past and present, mainly on the Appalachian Trail, though often on other trails as well. You know, it's always interested me how couples can spend 6 months together on the trail, literally in each other's pockets, with the same goal every day, especially spouses. Yet today we have another couple, but this time it's a father and daughter, Nugs and Kenbo. They hadn't originally planned to hike the whole thing together, yet that's pretty much how their trip went. They're going to be on shortly. Our rapidly dwindling Mighty Blue class of 2022, I really hope that this wasn't a curse for them, leaves us with just 3 people currently on trail, with Chuck Hayes waiting on his son to join him before he progresses again. So this week I caught up with Dan Whitesides, or Trumpet, who is very jollily pushing forward with his husky dog, FrankE. And when you hear Dan, you cannot fail to be impressed by his attitude. Dan will be on just after Nugs and Kenbo. After Dan, we're catching up with the woman we followed last year. Katie Westling is finishing off the 500 or so miles she didn't finish last year. As ever, Katie is a joy to talk with. Finally today, I've got to tell you, I didn't realise how long this journey was going to be. But we've got the second part of Chapter 3 of Then the How Came by George Stephanos. And even then, I don't think I finished the chapter. This is a long book, but I think it's such a, incisive story that I think I'm going to just saunter my way through it. So let's meet Kayla and Ken Bold, or Nugs and Kenbo. So today we've got a father and daughter duo on the show. This is Kayla and Ken Bold, or Nugs and Kenbo. Hey guys, how are you?
Good morning, Steve.
Good morning.
Hi. Now, the two of you completed the AT in 2020, which of course was COVID year. How did that even come on your radar that there was such a thing as the AT? Who discovered it?
Well, I was back in 2018, 2019, I was getting into reading a lot of different adventure books and mountain climbing books, which led me to a book on the AT, which I gave to Nugs when she was laid off.
And did you call her Nugs, by the way? Was that her name?
No, I still actually have a hard time calling her Nugs. She's my daughter, so it's always Kayla.
Yeah, okay, right. So what was it about the book? Tell me about the book then.
So the book was Lost on the Appalachian Trail, and it's just a great, fun-loving story. And when Kayla was laid off, she had some extra time. I was like, hey, here's a book. I mean, you don't have to go back to work right away because you're good and financially stable, so you don't have to go get a job right away. So have some fun, walk your dog, read a book, and she read the book.
Right. So you both read the book, and had either of you heard about the Appalachian Trail before? Had you heard about it, Kayla?
I don't think I had ever heard about it before. I heard about the Pacific Crest Trail, but not the AT.
Really? Right. So how had you heard about one, not the other then?
Well, the only reason I knew about the Pacific Crest Trail was from Wild.
All right. Okay.
And I'd heard about the AT through travels on the East Coast, and actually had hiked on the AT prior to the book. So
what was appealing then? What was it about was it the idea of the adventure or the idea of the hike?
Oh, definitely the adventure. I mean, just all the different things that Kyle talked about in his book was just, it sounded so much fun. And I never thought it'd be a realization for me because I was working a lot of hours. So it just never was something I ever contemplated until somebody decided.
Yep.
Take it up, Kaylee. I mean, you're going to pick this one up.
Yep.
Yeah. So after I read the book, I was just like, you know what, this sounds like a fun adventure. So I decided to do more research on it, and then decided that I was actually going to do it. And I would just started buying gear. And that's when he realized I was actually serious about doing it.
All right.
And I would poke little like elbow, like, hey, we should do it together. It'd be fun. And eventually it worked.
Why did you want to do that? Why do you want to do that together? Because for most people, this is their own journey. And a shared journey is you must have observed this on the trail. A shared journey is entirely different to a single journey. Was it an immediate thought for you that you'd like to go with your dad?
Yeah, because I had a lot of adventures with my mom doing vacations over the summer while she was on summer break. And with my dad traveling for work, we didn't get to go on those vacations together. So I thought it would be what better thing to do together than this awesome 6-month trip.
And did it work out that way?
I think it worked out.
Yeah. And I know that we've been talking about trail names quite a lot recently on the show for some reason. So let's get yours out of the way before I forget. We'll start with you, Ken, because I've got to tell you, Kenbo, for a guy called Ken Bold, is not the most original trail name. So who gave you that, and why did you accept it?
Well, this one kind of makes Kayla a touch angry. So my nickname from the time that Rambo, the movie, came out was always Kenbo. So whenever I'd be on like gaming sites, I was always Kenbo. And so my first day in the shelter, everybody's just kind of sitting around. It was a little bit rainy, and we're trying to get out of the rain, and everybody's talking about trail names. And it's like, well, I go by Kenbo. And John and Gigi, who are in the trail with us, they said, hey, that's a great trail name. And so it stuck. And yeah, Kayla's shaking her head on the video here, but she didn't quite agree that I get to name myself.
No.
You know what? I named myself, and I absolutely don't blame you, because last thing you want is a real crap name you don't like, isn't it?
Exactly. I didn't want to be stinky.
Exactly. Well, except, of course, your doubtless were, like the rest of us. So how come you got named then Nugs, which is a pretty cool name?
My full trail name is actually Nuggets, because I eat a lot of chicken nuggets, but that's a mouthful to say, so Nugs is just easier to say.
Nice one. And you were happy with that one? Who gave you that one?
I had a friend named Taps who gave it to me.
Nice. And what's the name of the friend?
Taps.
Oh, not Tats. Taps.
Yes.
Okay, because I was about to say, because you've got quite a few tattoos by the looks of the thing on all over your arms. No, I thought maybe you could have been tats as well. So yeah, and Ken's already told us, by the way, he has not got an 80 tattoo at all, and nor have I, by the way. I think it's something about me at my age, and you're 55, I think it is. It feels a bit strange to get a first tattoo in over 50, isn't it?
I think so. And if I were to get a tattoo, it would definitely be an AT. And I haven't quite found something that just represents what I want to have. So at some point I may. So
cool.
We'll see how it goes. Yeah.
Very cool.
I have two, so I guess I love the AT a little bit.
It's both your arms, isn't it? Is it full sleeve, both of them?
Yep.
Nice. Very nice. So you did the research. The stars have to align for most people to get on the trail. The stars align for you, but you said you were actually working at the time, Ken, and Kayla was laid off. So how did you actually get on the trail?
Well, she decided to, she was laid off in 2019, early 2019. And so she had a year to prepare, which gave me a lot of time to prepare as well. And, my thought was that I would hike the beginning of the trail, to Neil Gap, and then get off. And then as I traveled about the country, I would have gone to New York City or to Boston, or DC, and it just drove out and met her for hike a few days and then head back to work.
Right.
But obviously, COVID had a different destiny for both of us. Yeah, but we had a year to prepare, so we were able to really kind of dial in our packs and everything with that.
So the whole time you were planning to do a kind of several section hikes, but Kayla was going to do the whole thing. Is that right?
Correct. Yes.
Okay. So how did you do the research then, Kayla? Did you, I know the YouTube rabbit hole is a wonderful thing to get involved with. What did you discover from those videos? What do you think you learned from those videos that really helped you on the trail?
I watched several different people's videos on the trail, and one of the videos I loved, or people I loved watching, was Rocket, Julia Sheehan. She told you exactly how it was going on, like all the good and the bad. And I think that's what helped, is knowing it's not all sunshine and rainbows out there. And so that definitely was very helpful.
Did any of it put you off?
No.
Oh, right. Excellent. And how, so you worked out the gear. Of course, everybody's got an opinion on gear, don't they? Mm-hmm. So how did you actually refine what you needed for the trip?
We did a lot of like little practice hikes. There's a trail called the Goodwater Loop, goes around a lake that's near where we lived. And we just went out there and we would do like overnight hikes out there and get to test out our gear. And I learned, I need a little bit more clothing because sometimes I get colder than I think I would. Or like, this sleeping bag isn't warm enough, or I need to add a liner or whatever. Just doing that.
Sure. And so by the time you came, which is, and everybody knows you started in early March 2020, the worst time on earth to start, but you didn't know it at the time. You felt that your gear was dialed in. And what sort of weight were you both carrying?
I think my base weight at the time I started the AT was probably 12 to 14 pounds.
Wow. That's good. How about you, Ken?
Yeah, mine was about the same. I did the hammock route rather than tent. The old back needs the hammock for sure. And I was just a little bit heavier than she was. We both had similar packs. Or we were both hyperlight packs, and they were just great. And we were able to, I think we had a pretty decent base. We weren't certainly as light as some out there, but we were lighter than most, I think.
You were half the weight I had. My first day when in 2014, I was 42 pounds, including food and water.
Wow.
But I'm about 4 times your size, Kayla, so it's easy enough for me to carry that sort of weight. Were you happy with the choice of a hammock, by the way, Ken, or is that something that you didn't know? You hadn't quite worked out what you wanted? No,
actually, I think Kayla and I both got super lucky in that we didn't change a whole lot of gear throughout our hike. Right. We had a few issues here and there, but for the most part, our packs were pretty dialed in. And as far as the hammock goes, it was probably the best choice I could have made. I'm an older guy, and so the back can be kind of tough trying to lay on the ground and use a pad or a air mattress. It probably would have made it a much different hike. And because it was, COVID, because of COVID, there wasn't a whole lot of people on trail, so it was easy to find sites to string up the hammock. Yeah,
of course, yeah.
I only had to go to ground twice, and that was in areas where just there were no trees to use.
And what do you mean going to ground?
Sleeping actually on the ground. So I would take my my underquilt underneath my hammock, put that on the ground, and then the hammock, and then use my overquilt and just make a bed on the floor like that. It's not the most comfortable thing, but it can be done.
Was that in the shelter?
First one was on the ski area, Bromley.
Oh, wow. Yeah. I even
Wow.
offered to give him my pad because I was like, we're staying there. Like, I want to stay there. But when he couldn't find trees, I was like, you can use my sleeping pad because I'm forcing you to stay here. But he wouldn't take it.
Good teamwork. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So you started March the 5th. So what did you know about COVID at that time? I'm thinking back to that time myself, and I know that must have been midweek because I went to a conference that weekend, I think it was. So what had you learned so far about COVID? Anything at all?
I think it was like just coming into New York at that time. I don't think we knew much about what was going on at that.
Maybe a little bit in California as well too.
Yeah.
But it was just so foreign to us. We didn't think anything about it. I mean, we had heard about it and we knew it was affecting other countries, but you just don't think that's ever going to come to the United States and be a major force in the United States. And so we just decided to get on trail and press on.
Yeah. We'll learn about that one pretty quickly then.
Yeah,
yeah, we did.
COVID has some different ideas for us, obviously.
Yeah. And were the shelters, because obviously the shelters are the meeting point for most people most nights. Did you tend to do that, stay somewhere near shelters?
Yeah, I'm a dedicated brown blazer, so I have no problem hiking from shelter to shelter and using the privy at the shelter. So
I'd never heard that expression. That is a brown blazer. What a beautiful expression, by the way.
And I was totally okay with stealth camping wherever and digging cat holes. I didn't care.
So how did you get into the feral lifestyle? It is surprising how quickly we adapt to it. How did the two of you adapt to it, or had you already done so with your practice hikes?
I think Kayla probably did a better job than I did.
She's actually got the T-shirt by the looks of it. I think it says feral on the T-shirt. Yeah,
Yep.
Stay feral.
From Backpacker Radio.
Excellent. So tell us about that. What was it like for you then? Because most people tend to be relatively clean these days, but on the trail, it's tough to do that, isn't it? So how did you cope with it?
I think we stayed relatively clean. I mean, we were going into town and taking showers. I was more I'd rather use the facilities at the shelters.
The facilities, yeah.
Yeah.
As facilities go, they're not great, are they? But you know what? They work. They do the job, don't they?
And I will give a lot of hikers credit. They keep them pretty clean. I mean, I've been into, over my lifetime, been in a lot of bathrooms at gas stations, and except for one instance, I think all the facilities were clean. So, I mean, it wasn't that bad. I mean,
pretty cool.
Privies do get a bad name, but I think they are, for the most part, relatively clean.
So I know you were on till Neil Gap, Ken, but you actually, and from my notes were a bit garbled. I was making a lot of notes when we were talking the other day, probably because both of you were talking as well. So you got injured quite early on, didn't you, Kayla? Was it somewhere down Blood Mountain? What happened?
Yeah, we were coming down Blood Mountain, and like most people, we missed the turn and went down the giant rock slab.
Oh, excellent. Well done.
And then he was up ahead, and he saw the sign that said, "This is not the trail." And we were already most of the way down, and so we had to turn around and go back up and then actually go down the real trail. And I think in that time is whenever my Achilles ended up swelling to the point you couldn't see my ankle bones anymore. But I was still able to walk in a lot of pain. But I pushed through. I still kept going, and I didn't take a day off.
Wow. So because you were then going home, weren't you, Ken? Because down the bottom of the hill is Neil Gap.
Yes. Yeah.
So your daughter gets injured.
Mm-hmm.
And 4 miles away, 4 miles later, you left her.
Yeah, that was probably the toughest day on trail. Was she's injured and she's in tears, and here I am leaving to go get on an airplane and fly home, and it was a very, very tough night for sure. I was definitely questioning if I was doing the right thing. But then the next day she was up and she was hiking out the next day.
Isn't it amazing how quickly you can recover? Because I think every part of your body at some stage gets injured, doesn't it? Or it feels like it does, and you just kind of carry on. Was that the way with you throughout the whole thing then, Kayla? Or were you overlooking something that was a problem, or did you just simply walk it off?
I was just like, I can walk this off. And I just kept going. And that next day, I still went and did 11 miles till the next shelter. And I don't know if that was the smartest idea, but after that, I just went shelter to shelter, and they're like 8 to 10 miles apart. So I just did that. And
they started to improve. I mean, did it take quite long for you to get back into good health?
I think by the time when COVID eventually was like, okay, you need to get off the trail, I was finally starting to get to the point where like it wasn't like painful. Right. Like it was still like a dull ache.
But we're going to come to getting off the trail in a second, because I wonder if that saved your hike, if you know what I mean. You could have been doing some damage, couldn't you, while you were carrying on walking on what was obviously injured ankles. May well be that getting off trail helped. But in the interim, you'd actually formed a trail family, hadn't you?
Yeah, I did. I had a good group of people I was hiking with.
And for those people who listen to the show who don't hike and just listen to the show because I want to hear people's stories, tell us what that is. I mean, I know Tramley is a trail family. How did that form in your case? Because to me, it's almost like a miracle. It just happens, doesn't it? People kind of get together. What was the commonality between you all that made you get together?
So it was actually, we met them on the first day, or most of them. We were walking in the pouring rain. It was so cold. We were soaked, and we get to the shelter, and we were planning on just stopping for lunch because we wanted to make it all the way to Springer and stay there. But we got to the shelter. It was really, really cold and wet. So we changed to, kind of get warm while we're eating lunch, and all these people were there, and we were talking with them, and we just enjoyed their company so much. We decided just to stay. And apparently they knew who I was beforehand too.
How
because
they
they
know
had
you
seen my
were?
Instagram before.
Oh, right. I see.
So, but yeah, we ended up sticking with them. And then, after he had left, the group just kind of grew and got bigger.
And you got to Franklin, and then the ATC advised everybody to get off the trail. And by the way, at this stage, Ken was back in Texas. So what did your family do? Did you discuss going on, or I mean, was there any thought of going on?
Yeah, we were 2 days from Franklin when we got the email. We had just like random service, and we all just started crying because like we all quit our jobs and upended our lives to come out and do this, and now we have to go home. And so we were all just really upset, and we were like, you know what, let's just enjoy the last couple of days we have together before we all have to go home. And yeah, we all went home.
Right. So how impactful were those 2 weeks on trail then, Kayla? Had you got into some sort of rhythm that was working for you, and you were kind of thinking to yourself, I know how to do this now?
Yeah, exactly. I fell in love with being out there and hiking all day, every day, and not having to worry about anything else. And then I had to go home, and it was devastating. When I got home, it was basically dealing with post-trail depression, and I'd only been out there for 2 weeks.
Yeah, isn't that amazing? So what do you think it was about it that did it? And I'm sure you must have felt similar, by the way, Ken, even though you were probably only on trail for about 4 or 5 days, weren't you? To get to Blood Mountain? Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
I think you get a connection to the trail very, very quickly. I mean, you just, even in those first few days when you meet all these new folks and you're all on this common goal to try and make it to Springer. I mean, it was quite the experience, and knowing that I actually had to leave the trail was tough. And then COVID had other ideas for all of us. And so, Kayla came home, and then I ended up getting laid off from my job. I mean, within the first couple of weeks of the pandemic, I was laid off.
Wow. So that changed everybody's plans, obviously. And did you, when you actually got back, you said you're feeling post-trail depression, and were you intending to go back? You probably thought this is just 1 month, didn't you, Kayla? Were you intending to go back or not?
Yeah, that was my hope, was go home for a couple of weeks to a month, and then this will blow over, kind of like every other, virus or disease that kind of comes around. But unfortunately, it didn't go away.
Sure. But Ken, you'd lost your job by then. Yes. And so you were then thinking, I can make this a whole lot longer trip than I was expecting.
Yep, exactly. And once I was furloughed at first, so I was still actually an employee, and still had a health insurance and everything. Yeah. And so we couldn't travel though. I mean, there were travel restrictions, and we were going to honor those travel restrictions and not try and get out to AT. So we waited around till to June until the travel restrictions started easing up, and we're able to make it back out on the trail.
But when we spoke before, Ken, I think you told me that you bought something for the back of your truck, and you were going to support Kayla on trail. So why did that change?
So what I did is when I decided to really hike the trail, I'd actually bought a top for the bed of my truck, so I could actually sleep in the back of my truck, because I also had an Achilles injury that was really bothering me, and I thought, well, if I don't have a job and I can't hike, I don't want to go back to Texas and just watch it from the sidelines. I want to be involved, so I was actually going to take the truck out there and be a support person.
You're a good dad. Well done.
Yeah, well, it would have been a fun way to be a part of the adventure.
Of course.
And luckily, I just never had any issues with my Achilles on the trail, so I was just super lucky with that.
Yeah, you gave it all to me.
but you got over it.
Yeah, eventually.
So you got back on at Franklin. What was you got back on in June in Franklin, and then you went to where?
Well, what I did is I went out a week early, and I went from Neal Gap to Franklin to make up that distance that I had missed. And then Kayla flew in, and we got on trail at Franklin, and then just started heading north.
Right. Okay. And what was the plan?
There was no plan.
Excellent.
Just walk.
Excellent.
Yeah. It was just hiking north. And as we started getting further north, we just realized that you're just not going to be able to, our speed is just not going to allow us to get to Katahdin by the end of September. So we we and the new people we were hiking with all kind of had that same idea that we're going to have to flip at some point.
Sure.
And unfortunately, the people in our family at that point all had different ideas on where to flip, when to flip, and how to do it. And so unfortunately, our second trail family kind of blew up again because we all had different ideas on how to do that.
Had any of the original trail family gone back with you, or had they just gone their own separate ways by now?
There was only one person from the original group that actually got back on, but he got on about a month before we did.
Right.
And he never ended up having to flip.
And you made it, I think, I'm looking at my notes again, you made it to Damascus.
Correct, yes.
And then you flipped up to Pauling in New York. How much of a flip is that? And how far of a distance is that?
It skips about a little under 1,000 miles.
Okay.
So what we did is we got off trail at Damascus. We got a rental car, right, and we drove to DC and visited a friend's restaurant and had a good night in DC and did I think we did scooters or something there.
Yeah, we were gonna walk the mall, but your feet had swollen so much in the car ride up there that you couldn't wear your shoes anymore.
I couldn't put my shoes on; they were so swollen.
So we just scootered the whole thing instead, and I think that was a great way to do it.
Yeah, it was definitely fun. And it was really quiet because obviously we're in the middle of a pandemic and there weren't as many people out, so it was
sure,
relatively deserted. And then the next day we drove to New York City, and the car rental place was at Central Park South, and so we dropped the car off, loaded up our packs, and we thru-hiked Central Park to the north side. and
then we hopped on bikes and rode south.
Yeah.
Oh, dear.
Our hotel was south of Central Park near Grand Central Station.
Right.
And so we thru-hiked, and then we rode bikes down to our hotel.
And was your leg improving by now or not?
Yeah,
I actually meant Ken's. You said it was just spinal up from the drive, so just another drive as well.
Yeah, I took some ibuprofen, and my feet did the swelling did go down, and then by then Kayla's injury I think was better too, right?
Yeah.
So you're all ready to go. You get back on trail. What was your relation? Because the whole dynamic had changed by now. You were then. Your plan had changed for the year, Ken, obviously, and you were now hiking, going north with Kayla. What was your relationship like as hikers? In other words, were you making the decisions as the dad, Ken, or did you work together as hikers? How did that work out? Because I always wonder about that between, parents and children, although Kayla's obviously not a child. She's in her mid-20s. So.
Okay. Yeah, it was definitely a couple hikers together because I certainly didn't make the decisions. And actually, Kayla had a kind of a running spreadsheet of where we're going and how many miles we're doing and what shelters we're going to. And obviously we didn't plan too far in advance, but it was her hike. And so I was taking a bit of a back seat to let her do the thing that she wanted to do. And I'm just along for the ride in essence.
Yeah, I was struck by that the other day when you said that. You said it was her hike. Did you feel like it was your hike, or did you feel it was a shared endeavor then, Kayla?
I think it was a shared endeavor. I was the one that decided to do it, but we were both out there together doing it. And so I think it was each of our hikes. Like we, did our own thing sometimes during the day. Like we didn't hike all day together, but, we were doing this together at the same time.
Sure.
Yeah, I just didn't want to be the overbearing dad and try and, dominate things, like sometimes dads can do.
Really? Of course they can. Yeah. So you went through the Whites, you went through Who's It Not, you did all the exciting bits of the trail. Did you? By the way, how was the Whites for the two of you? Is it because they are whatever people say, they are bloody tough, aren't they?
Oh, they're so hard, but it's so rewarding.
Oh yeah.
It's definitely a beautiful section.
Yeah, the Whites were definitely my favorite section. I mean, in fact, I even went back and finished off the New Hampshire 48 last year.
Oh, wow.
That was definitely the highlight I think one of the major highlights of the trip.
And I know that when I went first time in 2014, I remember coming to Monson, and it's almost like there's a stopping point at Monson. People stop and almost gird themselves for the 100-mile wilderness and then Katahdin, and people started accumulating at Monson. What was it like for you? Because you still knew you had to turn around and do another 1,000 miles. Were you feeling their excitement?
I don't think to the same degree. I mean, we were still excited to get to Katahdin because it was going to be just over halfway. I think the mileage ended up being like like 1,212 miles when we
Sure.
hit Katahdin.
Right.
So like we were halfway, so it was still a good celebration on top of Katahdin.
And I know that when you go through the 100-mile wilderness, people these days can get out quite often. I mean, I got out 4 nights in the 100-mile wilderness. I went back to Monson each night for 4 nights, which is ridiculous, I know. Did you go all the way through, or did you come out partway through?
No, we went all the way through. We did get a food drop halfway through, though.
Yeah. And that's probably the best way to do it. And I did that second time, by the way, and I enjoyed it far more second time going through all the way through. So Katahdin is a great day for everybody, and I'm sure it was a different feeling for you as it was to other people who were actually finishing. Did you go home then, or did you get straight back to it, or back to Pauling and then start going south?
Well, we finished with our tramway at that point.
Right. Sure.
And then we went back to the hostel, and we got another rental car, and we drove a couple of the tramway down to Boston. They got on a plane. And we went back down to New York City and spent, I think, 5 nights in New York City.
Wow.
Kind of recharging. And then Kayla needed to get some glasses. And so that was a bit of a fiasco with the folks at the people that make the glasses.
That was a lot of back and forth, but I got my glasses. And
Yeah.
I was also nursing what I thought was an injury. I mean, I guess it technically was. My hips were having a lot of issues where they were going numb and like tingly, and I couldn't really feel, like if I scratched my skin, I couldn't feel what was going on. And turns out my hip belt was just too tight on my hips, so it was cutting off the circulation.
Helpful.
So I learned to not have it as tight.
That's all you have to do. Yeah, you should kind of readjust it all the time, by the way.
I mean, I was dropping so much weight that my pack just wasn't staying up. So
Ken, it was all over. You got to you finished. Did you finish at the sign at Damascus?
Yes.
That's nice. That's a pretty good finish. I mean, just to walk into some such and such road, and that's the end of your hike. That wouldn't be very nice. But to finish actually at the sign of Damascus is a very iconic place as well. So that was a pretty cool place to finish. So what did you learn about your daughter on the trail?
Oh, I learned that she is one of the strongest people I've ever met. I mean, my hike was pretty uneventful, but she had a lot of injuries, and every time she rose to the occasion, I mean, she kind of downplayed it, about her hips. When we got done with the 100-mile wilderness, she was actually in tears, and to the point where I wasn't sure if she was going to be able to make it up to Katahdin. And she gathered herself, and we took about an hour at that little, I forget what the name of the place is, that little convenience store.
Abel Bridge.
Yes, yeah. So we stayed there for about an hour, and she gathered herself, and she was able to make it up to the campsite. And next day she made it up Katahdin. I mean, she's super, super strong, and when she puts her mind to something, she does it. And there are folks out there that said she probably won't be able to make it, but she did. She proved them all wrong, and she's done some hiking since the AT, and again, every time she sets out to hike, she finishes it. So
cool.
She's a badass hiker.
So in that case, I've got to ask you, in that case, Kayla, what did you learn about your dad you didn't know already?
He's amazing also. And I just...
You couldn't say anything else, by the way.
It's just we were close before, but I think the hike definitely brought us a lot closer, and we learned a lot more about each other, and just the bond is a lot stronger now.
Yeah. And of course, you've got that thing you're going to share forever. That's never going to go away. You've done that. So that's the wonderful thing. And what did you learn about yourselves on the trail? Do you think you discovered something within yourself you didn't know before, either of you?
I realized how much I actually love being outside. Like before, I would just kind of go work, go home, stay inside all day, watch TV or whatever. But I realized how healing the outdoors is, and my mental health is so much better than it was before, and I'm stronger than I thought I was. And because I always thought that I was weak because I was always depressed and just didn't care. And then I do this hike, and now I'm in the best place I could ever be right now.
And did you notice that about yourself once you finished the hike, or did you feel yourself, as it were, getting better, if that's the word, getting better as the hike was going on?
Yeah, I could tell. Like, I mean, it was slow progress, but I definitely I definitely saw myself being happier. And then people even like would post on my pictures, like the comments and stuff, be like, you look so much happier than you were like last year. And, you know, that definitely like helped a lot.
And when you finished, did you find yourself slipping back into post-trail depression, or did you handle that far better, second time?
There was a lot going on when I first got home.
Okay.
So yeah, I think I slipped in a little bit, but then I went and did some other hikes and it helped.
Always does, yeah. And what about you, Ken? Did you learn anything about yourself you didn't know? Because, you know, by the time you get to your 50s, you should have a rough idea what you like, shouldn't you?
Well, I definitely learned that all you need is what's on your back. So
best lesson, isn't that the best lesson to learn?
It is. I mean, you don't need stuff, and it's just amazing how little stuff you need, and you don't need a big giant house. You can live out of a hammock for 6 months, or
the back of your truck,
or the back of my truck. I did a summer in the back of my truck after the hike, and
fantastic.
Now I actually have a trailer, and I live in a small little 20-foot travel trailer, and you don't need a whole lot of space. You just need a place to lay your head down and sleep. So. And
you said that Kayla's been hiking again. Have you been hiking again, Ken?
Not so much. You know, I went back to New Hampshire and did the New Hampshire 48. I biked from Pittsburgh to DC. But the hiking bug didn't certainly bite me like it did Kayla. I mean, she just got off of a pretty major hike this year.
All right, cool. Will you go on another hike together, do you think? Probably not a long one, I suspect.
I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah. All right. Suppose you seem open to it. You can both go over the Triple Crown together. There can't be too many pairs of like this have gone for the Triple Crown together.
Father-daughter Triple Crowners. That'd be interesting.
That's right. There you go. There you go. Okay. Well, look, it's been lovely to have you on the show. I've always been fascinated by the interrelationship between family members and how they actually would get on trail. It's clear from the two of you that it worked for the two of you. So I'm glad you got through it without killing each other. That's always a good thing. And I appreciate you coming on the show. Okay.
All right. Appreciate it, Mighty Blue.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Cheers then.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
What a good dad he is, eh? It was his daughter's hike, and even though he was a dad, it was all about getting her to live her dream. And it's funny how people start out with one intention on this hike, yet it often transforms into something else. As our Mighty Blue class of 2022 are finding out, it isn't all sunshine and rainbows, but Kayla pushed on through her injuries and made it happen. I'm pretty sure that she credits Ken for his support and their eventual success. Now, before we move on, I'm aware that I haven't really plugged our other shows on the Hiking Radio Network. So for those of you who don't know, we currently have 7 shows available for you to listen to, all free of charge. Each one of them is about hiking, so let's quickly run through them. The second show on the network after mine was the Trail Danes podcast. Anna Huthmaker is a former guest on this show and such a character that I asked her if she'd like to start a Trail Danes specific podcast. Of course, her organisation provided many of the early guests, but she's expanded her horizons and introduced many new phases to her show. She's got a terrific interviewing style. I'm sure you'll really get into the show if you give her a listen. Then there is the Jester Section Hiker Show. Jester, or Julie, was another guest on my show, and she came out to hike with me on my 2019 hike just for a day. Like Anna, I love her attitude, and it was during that day hike that I asked her to think about doing the show. She was so proactive, and the show was built quite a following already. She's now covered pretty much all of the national scenic trails and really shone a light on a local trail in North Carolina, the Mountains to Sea Trail. Check it out and hear how the section hikers do it. Then our most recent podcast, Hiking Unfiltered. Courtney Miller took up my invitation to join the network and has carved out an interesting little niche for herself. She always has a question that she's trying to answer with a guest. I think it's a really neat idea, and frankly, I wish I thought of it myself. And Courtney's shows keep getting stronger with each one she releases. So, they're the regular shows you can check out. Additionally, we have 3 full shows with Returning to Katahdin, which charts the preparation and execution of Bruce Matson's 2018 thru-hike. In fact, his listenership increases every year as we approach a new thru-hiking season. He was so thorough and people learn a lot about preparation for their own hikes. Then JR hikes the Appalachian Trail. Unfortunately, JR or Ryan wasn't successful, but I still keep his episodes up there to give you all a warts and all presentation of the difficulties of taking on a hike like this. Finally, but by no means the least, Dixie shares her 2018 Continental Divide hike, including her encounter with a mountain lion. As she is on her video channel, she is engaging, funny, and entirely open sharing her stories. So there we are, 7 podcasts to listen to, and all of them can be found at hikingradionetwork.com. Hope you check them all out sometime. Now, Trumpet and FrankE. And Trumpet, or Dan, is positivity central today. Here's Dan.
Hello.
Hey Dan, how are you?
Hey, pretty good. How you doing?
Not too bad. You sent me a text this afternoon saying that you're at Harper's Ferry. So, have you filled in all the miles beneath you apart from the Smokies?
Yeah, just about.
Fantastic.
So I'm in Maine currently.
Oh right.
I started driving up the other day.
Oh right.
But,
Okay.
FrankE. But yeah, FrankE. No.
Yeah, we're recording by the way.
Sorry.
Yeah. So you got to Harper's Ferry. When was that?
About 4 days ago.
Oh right. Okay.
3 days ago.
Yeah. And so the idea is to go now. Are you going all the way to Katahdin now to climb Katahdin, then go south?
So I'm not climbing Katahdin. I'm starting at the 100-mile wilderness.
Oh right. So you're literally going to leave Katahdin right to the end, are you, or not?
I mean, if it works out that I can go fly back up to Maine at the end and summit Katahdin, I will.
Right.
But I'm here to hike with my dog. Whether that ends at Katahdin or it ends at Harper's Ferry, West Virginia, that's where it ends.
Right. Well, we haven't spoken for a few weeks, so tell us what's been happening.
Well, actually, I thought about you a week or so ago because I was hiking, and one of the dudes I was with asked me, "Hey, are you podcasting?" And I said, "Actually, yeah, I am on one." And he recognized me from the podcast, from my voice, and from looking at FrankE.
Yeah,
I'm cool.
I'm sure looking at FrankE, he's a very distinctive looking dog.
You really can't miss him. Yeah, and yeah, it's just been unbearably hot and
really
so buggy. My legs are bleeding.
Oh my gosh!
And I thought, hell, my car's in New Jersey, and there's an Amtrak in Harper's Ferry, West Virginia.
Right.
Why not flip-flop? Sounds very appealing.
Oh, okay. So this was a kind of a bit of a spur of the moment thing?
It probably came around mile 800 when I was hiking at like 5 in the morning, because I usually am on trail by like 4:35
sure,
to beat the heat. And it was 5 a.m. and I was swatting bugs and I was sweating bullets. And I was like, what is the point of waking up early to hike if it's always hot? And I thought, well, Maine's nice and cool. So, yeah.
So how is FrankE in the heat? How's he coping with it?
I mean, he does well as a husky can do. He's all white, which definitely helps with that. And we'll hike super early in the morning, and then we'll take big breaks during the middle part of the day. But I think he does better with the heat than I do. The heat just makes me angry and upset.
It is exhausting. There's no question. I met a guy actually during the heat of summer. He would stop for about 3 hours at a shelter and sleep for 2 or 3 hours, maybe even 4 hours, because he said this is just pointless. Me hiking in this, it just gets me pissed off with everybody, and I'd rather just have a sleep during the day and start early and finish as late as I possibly can. So, and you're still obviously managing FrankE's diet. Does his diet change on the trail? Does he want things in a different way, or is he just pretty consistent with what he eats?
No, he's pretty happy. I mean, this food that I did for the entire Colorado Trail, right, the Honest Kitchen, and he absolutely loves it. He goes nuts for it. And then, just like we do when we go into town, we eat burgers and pizza and all the like. When he goes into town, I get turkey bacon and sardines, a lot of herring. And yeah, no, he's just happy to eat as much as I can possibly give him.
And what about the water? How's the water been? With it being so dry, has the water been quite difficult to come by?
Yeah, the water, I mean, I'm used to long dry stretches, but it still sucks when I have to carry like 10 pounds of water for me and for FrankE, because his breakfast alone takes a half liter and his dinner takes a full liter of water. So there's no dry camping that we do.
Wow.
Always near water.
I was thinking about that the other day because I've been hearing it's been so hot up there, and wondered how he was coping, how the two of you were coping with the lack of water. Are you noticing other hikers having issues with it?
I mean, definitely, yeah, a little bit. I remember there was one time I cameled up in the morning for like a 10-mile dry stretch, and I noticed like 7 hikers sitting at this gap where they heard potentially there was going to be a water cache, but all there was were empty gallon jugs.
That is the worst. When that happens.
Yeah, I mean, thankfully with the experience from the Colorado Trail, I mean, I'm used to 15, 16-mile dry stretches, so like I'm used to cameling up. It's just annoying. And then sometimes, oh my God, you'll get to a shelter and it'll be like, yeah, you just hike like a half mile straight down this hill and there'll be water. And it's like, just tell me there's no water and I'll keep hiking.
Oh dear. Are you still having fun, Dan? Is this something is it what you expected it to be?
I don't think it is what I expected it to be, but I am having a lot more fun. I did the Aqua Blaze with 2 of my friends.
All right, cool.
So we canoed for 3 days, and that inspired pretty much a lot of the stuff that I just picked up at REI. So I just picked up a titanium frying pan and a spatula.
Oh my
I'm
gosh.
Gonna be cooking. Oh yeah. Oh, I'm going hardcore. I'm going to be making pancakes on trail every week. I'm going to be making stir fry with sauteed vegetables. I am hereby dedicated to less miles and more meals. Eating is my favorite part of the trail.
So it's meals, not miles, is it?
Meals, not miles. I'm going to start saying that. Exactly. It's just, I mean, we made pancakes, and when we went through Shenandoah through the last stretch and we went through the last wayside, I decided to carry the frying pan that we had brought along for canoeing, and I picked up a dozen eggs, and I carried a dozen eggs about 6 miles, and we had 10 eggs and pancakes for dinner, and it was amazing.
That is cool. Good for you. You're doing your very own hike, and let's say you're one of the very few class of 2022 who's still actually out on trail, which is quite amazing for me anyway. Because normally
really?
I heard
that from the one dude who recognized me. That apparently people have been dropping out a while, and he was like, "Yeah, I heard you were carrying your dog's food."
Yeah,
and, I bet, I'm pretty surprised, but I'm liking it.
That's cool. So where are you now? You say you're in Maine. What the plan is to get to Able Bridge, I suppose. What are you going to do with your car?
Yeah, so thankfully I have an aunt in Maine who I'm going to leave my car there. Right. And thankfully enough, I used to work at a summer camp in Maine, and one of my friends is working at a place nearby. So I'm going to go pick him up in the morning. We're going to drive over there. He's going to drop me off, and then he's going to drive my car back here to Portland next week. And then the car is just going to hang out here for the next 3 months.
Perfect. So you're going to be heading south from Able Bridge, the 100-mile wilderness going that way. You shouldn't have too much problem with water there, I wouldn't have thought. I'm pretty sure you won't. Are you prepared for some of the, have you really built up yourself? Because some of the mountains are quite tough, in New Hampshire, even in southern Maine as well. Are you prepared for this, do you think?
Oh, yeah. I think I'm very prepared. I mean, I definitely think I have my trail legs. I mean, so I had, I think, norovirus for like 6 days, right? And it was unbearable. But for like the week leading up to it, we did 20 to 25 miles every single day.
Wow.
And granted, that was in flatter terrain, but I mean, living in Colorado, hiking straight up a bunch of rocks is my favorite thing to do, And now that I'm kind of going southbound, and I don't have to worry about, timing and everything, and I don't have to worry about beating the heat, I'll just do 12 miles a day. I'll do 15 miles a day, and then I'll make pancakes. I'm in no rush. FrankE's in no rush, and I have more than enough food at all times.
Meals, not miles. I'm going to put that in the show notes somewhere. I'm
going to get that tattooed on myself. That's awesome.
Meals, not miles. Yeah, you should get a website, mealsnotmiles.com. Very cool. Yeah. Well, look, I'm so glad that you're still enjoying it as well. You do seem to have this joy, and I'm sure it's because of FrankE. You're sharing this with your mate, really, aren't you?
I think you're really right, because there's, you can be as upset as you want, but I pretty much am hiking with a giant fluffy ball of pure serotonin. So, like, if you wake up and you've had a bad night's sleep, you can just rub over and cuddle him. Or, like, if you're having a bad day at the end of the day, Frankie does this thing now where he will curl up inside a fire pit, and it's hysterical. He's just always having such a good time. And the few times I was really thinking about quitting, I just look at him and be like, he's having so much fun.
Right.
You know?
Right.
Who am I to say no to that?
And when you were in Shenandoah, did you see any bears at all? And did he do anything?
No bears. I mean, I did meet this one guy in Virginia who told me they hunt bears with dogs.
That's right.
That could be a reason so that could be a reason I have literally in all of my hiking, I have never seen a bear.
Wow.
Yeah. 1,600 miles of hiking. I have never seen a bear. I've seen 2 moose and a lot of deer.
Right. Well, I hope you see some more moose. The moose are still the most wonderful animal to see. Well, look, cool. Best of luck going south. And saving Katahdin to the end is still a pretty cool thing to do, and hopefully you still get the chance to do that. We'll catch up again in a couple of weeks' time, and just keep heading south and keep enjoying it as much as you are. You're a real joy to talk to, so I'm glad you're having such a great time, and we just wish you the best. Okay.
Thank you. Yeah, if I'm not having fun, what's the point of being out here?
Damn right. Okay, matey, you take it easy, all right?
Thank you. You too.
Cheers, Dan. Bye.
All right. Bye.
Well, I tell you, meals, not miles. With the number of FKTs, or fastest known times, about being attempted on the AT recently, it is refreshing to hear a bloke talk about his joy at hiking with his dog and his determination to do it entirely his way. Nice one, Dan. So let's hear now from Katie. We caught up on Tuesday morning, and as usual, she was on a mountain somewhere in Virginia. Here she is. Hey, Katie, how are you?
I'm good. I'm tired.
Oh, yeah?
Here in the beautiful shade of a tree with about a mile to go before I get off this mountain into a hostel.
You've got some warm weather there, haven't you? You've got some real warm weather.
Well, in the sun, it is really hot, but in the shade, it's, very reasonable.
So where have you been then this week? What's been going on?
Let's see.
Because you're in Grayson Highlands. I think we were talking about Grayson Highlands last week.
Grayson Highlands, and then I stayed in Marion and slack packed.
Right.
And now I am just over the mountain that has Jenny Knobb's shelter. That was a climb, all-day climb.
Right.
And I'm heading to a new hostel called Burke's Garden Hostel.
Oh, so have you been to, I'm trying to think what it's called now, Chestnut Knob Shelter?
I just stopped there about 30 minutes ago.
I love it there because you've got that beautiful view of Burke's Garden, haven't you?
Yes, yes. And I'm coming I am coming off the mountain now. So I'm heading northbound and
so
hang on, I've got a hiker coming here. Get my stuff out of the way. Are we recording?
Yeah, say Mighty Blue says hello. No, don't do that. Don't do that. No.
No.
Right. So what have you heard about this Burke's Garden hostel?
Well, not much. I'm just looking for a bed and a shower.
Oh, okay. Just it wasn't one there before. When there wasn't one there, so I presume it's a new one, and I've certainly heard people speak highly of it as well. So what about injuries? Are you getting any, how are your legs feeling and how are you generally feeling?
I'm doing pretty good, but I'm really taking a ton of breaks. And today, I just put the knee brace on just to give a little extra support because I was doing a lot of climbing and then going down. So, but I feel pretty good. I looked, and at the base of the mountain, in another a mile, I will have 100 miles in Virginia. Wow. And it's been 10 days.
Nice. Wow, you've got some good mileage, decent mileage, really.
Yeah, I slack packed on Saturday, so that was nice. I stayed in Marion and then got a shuttle. And
hang on. You're speaking you're speaking as if you shouldn't slack pack. Of course, you should slack pack as much as you possibly can.
Yeah. Oh yeah, no, it helped. I did it from the Mount Rogers headquarters to Atkins. So from Marion to Atkins, and that was good. And so I've got the rest of this week, and then I'm going to take a zero in, where is it? I'm going to take a zero in Bland.
Right, okay.
So
terrible name. Isn't that a terrible name for a place, by the way, Bland?
I know, really, yeah.
So
oh my God.
Now you're back. How different does it feel compared to when you were last on the trail?
Mm-hmm. You know, the difference is I haven't gone through the honeymoon period.
Right.
When you first start hiking, you're like, oh, yay, this is so cool, you know. And I still, every day as part of my practice, I try to be mindful and look for the beauty where I am. But, you know, there's none of that, what's the word, innocence anymore.
Right. That's kind of sad. That's kind of sad.
I know what's in front of me, you know, and so, but I do enjoy it. And I'm running into section hikers, I'm running into day hikers, and then there's still a few people who are northbound, and, you know, so they're a little behind the bubble, I think. But,
and then what's their plan? Are they talking about flipping up to Katahdin?
I think so. Most of the people that I've talked to weren't sure what their plan was, so I think they've started and they're just going to give it everything they've got.
But Katie, just existing on the trail in itself is a pretty cool thing to do. So I don't think anybody needs to be forced into doing anything. If they want to take months and months and months to walk north, they should take months and months and months to not walk north.
Right.
That old expression, last one of Katahdin wins is never more true.
Right.
Yeah.
That's right, man. Every day that I'm out here, I am grateful. Good. I mean, just to get to come and play in the woods, and
and also seeing it at a different time, I guess, as well. So you're seeing Virginia in this warm weather. Is it very much a green tunnel once you get in the woods again?
You know what it is? It's yes. There's a lot. I'm going through a lot of those rhododendron tunnels, and then I'm in, the high, cool forest. But also every day now, even since Grayson Highlands, I'll emerge out into a meadow or a big field, and the trail will go for quite a ways. So there's that difference. I scared myself the other day. I was just walking through this meadow, hadn't seen any cows, and I came up, and oh my gosh, the biggest cow I've ever seen was standing right in front of me, and I just like, hello.
I think they're a whole lot more intimidating than they really are, if you know what I mean. And I remember I went through and off, I think it was Tennessee 91, you go through this field, and we suddenly heard this, and there was some people in front of me, and suddenly we heard this thundering, and it was a bull charging across towards us.
Oh my Lord!
Yeah, oh God, and fortunately, the woman in front of us had the presence of mind to blow her whistle, and the bull veered off into the forest, and that's where a lot of the cows were. Obviously, he didn't want anybody to get between him and his cattle. So,
oh my gosh! Well, if I end up in a field with a bull, I'm going to be really scared.
Yeah, quite right too.
It turns out by the time I climbed up into the trees, it was a nursery. There were all these calves, and they just were watching me. But hopefully you won't see any bulls.
Nice. Well, look, next week, tell us about what it's like at this new hostel. Because any of these hostels would obviously like publicity. So if you think of let's talk about that next week. If you think of a couple of hostels you want to talk about, what you think good things of, and we'll talk about that. Okay.
Yeah, I'm kind of excited. I remember the drawing point. They have a waffle iron.
There you go. What could be better than a waffle iron?
That's right.
Oh dear, it's funny. Funny. All right, Katie. Well, look, you enjoy the day and enjoy the hostel, and we'll speak again this week. Okay.
All right, Steve. Take care.
All right. Cheers, then. Bye. Gosh, she's all business now, isn't she? And she didn't get the honeymoon period this time around. She knew what to expect. It's nice to hear her back in what really seems like her element. Just before we finish up with Then the Hail Came, thanks go as ever to our donors. Monthly donors Jan Haley, Betty McEnany, John Cratler, Anne Pickin, Sean Deb Wiley, Emmanuel Bravo Ramos and Alan Troy stuck with us this month and helped us keep our heads above water. Thanks to all of you, and while you're on the Hiking Radio Network website checking out all the shows you've missed, take a moment to click on one of the donate buttons to help us bring even more shows to you in the future. Now, the very long Chapter 3 finds our hero still in the Smokies with limited food. That is not a good combination. I'll see you next week. Friday the 20th of May 1983, mile 206.8. I'm sitting in Ice Water Spring Shelter, 13.2 scant miles from where I was this morning. I'm running out of food and it is pouring again. I think that I'm starting to hate the Smokies and their dismal rainforests. On top of everything else that has gone wrong, Dave and I are the 5th and 6th thru-hikers to arrive here tonight, and only 3 spots are assured. I really don't want to pitch my tent in this monsoon. Life sucks. The day started off well. It was an overcast morning, but gradually clearing. I made the initial 3-mile climb to Clingman's Dome, the highest point on the Appalachian Trail, in good shape in about 90 minutes. The summit had an observation tower, but it was completely engulfed by a cloud. The trail past Clingman's was extremely swampy from yesterday's rain, and steep and broken by constant washouts as well. It was a lot of work to keep my shoes and socks, still damp from yesterday, from becoming completely waterlogged. On a more pleasant note, I did get some good shots from Mount Buckley, a minor summit of Clingman's Dome, of the distant peaks and valleys as the clouds finally started to lift. The prospective halfway point of our ambitious 20-mile hike was Newfound Gap, the deep slash in the mountain range where US 441 and Tennessee 71 share the only road which crosses it. The weather continued to improve as we approached Indian Gap, with Newfound Gap less than 2 miles ahead. We were making excellent time and had not yet even stopped to rest. The 20-mile day we needed seemed in the bag. As we climbed out of Indian Gap, the clouds began to return. When we were still a half mile from Newfound Gap, the sky fell. The 3-mile climb from Newfound Gap to this shelter was endless misery today. There was no wind, but rain was falling in sheets, heavier than yesterday. The already saturated slopes instantly sprouted scores of cascading streams. I soon abandoned completely my effort to avoid puddles. The world was one big puddle. Within 5 minutes, my feet were swimming around inside of my boots. All of my toes felt arthritic, and my right calf was cramping up as tightly as a miser's fist. Even though it was just 3 when I arrived here, I knew that I was finished. The next AT shelter is 8 miles away. If the weather had held, we could have cruised in. Now Dave and I need food very badly, and it is 28 miles to Devonport Gap. When the rain first struck, I walked along yelling obscenities for a solid 10 minutes. Looking back now, that strikes me as being somewhat humorous. I think that I'll make some dinner. Later, the same night. Good news. Although 15 people are now here to spend the night in a 12-bunk shelter, 4 have decided to pitch tents in order to escape the crowd. My space is secure. The 2 latest arrivals are Steve and Diane, the couple from Louisville we met 2 nights ago. It was good to see them again, even though Steve looked at me like I was a maggot when, in conversation, I ignorantly pronounced the name of his city Louisville, and he gently but firmly had to inform me that's Louisville in his refined southern drawl. The other 4 thru-hikers, besides Dave and myself, who are staying at this shelter tonight, include a guy from Minnesota, a Wisconsin couple who talk like the characters on Second City Television's skit The Great White North, but turned out to be pretty cool. I'm sure my Southwestern Connecticut variation of the New York City accent made me sound like a thug to them, and an older woman hiking the Appalachian Trail in short instalments. She had started this portion of her hike today at Clingman's Dome. As usual, we began sharing trail stories. Dave told us all that he had bought one of those disposable battery-powered watches, note a newly marketed novelty in 1983, for this trip. When he reached the first shelter on Springer Mountain, he checked his watch while making the trip to the spring to fill his water bottles. It was blinking 11:30 a.m. on January the 1st. 2 days later, at Neal Gap, he fulfilled the watch's ultimate destiny and disposed of it. Speaking of watches, all of this wind-blown rain seems to have finished off my cheap wind-up pocket watch. It keeps stopping unpredictably. I'll have to pick up a new one in Hot Springs. Another story concerned an incident which happened to Dave on the trail today. He was walking along the usual soggy, muddy footpath during the monsoons. A huge fallen tree had blocked the path. It was too high to step over and too close to the ground below to duck underneath as he walked. Dave had to crawl on his belly like an earthworm in order to pass beneath the obstruction. He struggled to the other side and resumed his hike, covered in mud, meanwhile looking back at the tree as he walked in order to call it a few choice names. While thus preoccupied, he strode straight into another patch of ankle-deep mud. He was laughing as he told this story, but I doubt he found it humorous at the time. By the way, I remember passing that tree myself. I had the sense to climb laboriously over it, although I was exhausted. My backpack seemed to weigh a ton. Nevertheless, I can understand the temptation to take what at first appears to be the easy way out. A short-term hiker at the shelter tonight made a big batch of popcorn, and I was treated to a couple of handfuls. Another fellow last night at Double Springs shared some popcorn with me. I do not know where I would be right now without these people. I have always relied on the kindness of strangers. Still later, same night. Just to make this wonderful day perfect, a skunk has been swaggering around the shelter as if he owned the place for the past half hour. Everybody's wearing kid gloves, but a lot of funny jokes are going around. Tension is so thick in here, you could cut it with a Swiss Army knife. I've just thought of a name for this chapter. The problem is, some Einstein has left an entire box of Quaker Oats sitting on the floor over by the wall, and that is what has attracted Pepe Le Pew. Compounding that problem for me, the idiot left it right next to my backpack, putting all of my worldly possessions directly on the firing line at this moment. It is crisis time at Icewater Springs. Submitted for your approval. A rat-infested, leaky-roofed, dilapidated old hovel. A visit from a hungry skunk. 12 weary backpackers hiking the narrow, winding path that leads to the Twilight Zone. Very late bulletin. The skunk has just departed after about an hour. Somebody has placed the rest of the oatmeal outside. The crisis has apparently ended without tragedy. Good night from Icewater Springs. Saturday, the 21st of May, 1983, mile 219.1. Last night, I think I drank too much tea. On what was probably the coldest, wettest and dreariest night of my entire hike up to this point, I was compelled to crawl out of my warm sleeping bag 6 times to make trips outside. What a drag! When I awoke this morning, a bleak, cold rain was pouring down upon these mountains. I'm extremely thankful for this wool sweater. I thought about mailing it home from Fontana Village when I realised I had not yet worn the thing, but decided to hold on to it for the high elevations of the Smokies. Good thing. I didn't start hiking until 10 o'clock. I was waiting for a break in the weather in order to get a good look at the famous stretch of narrow trail which clings precariously to the cliffs on Charlie's Bunyan. It was about a half mile from the shelter. Although the sky never did actually clear, the rain did stop and the clouds lifted a bit off of the ridge. The National Park Service has recently rerouted the Appalachian Trail around the safe, boring side of the Bunyan. If I was looking for safe and boring, I would have remained in Connecticut and kept my job pumping gas. I took the old trail around the Tennessee side. It was not as scary as other backpackers had led me to believe that it would be, but it was impressive. The clouds had lifted just enough to give me nice views into Tennessee and a good look at the precipitous drop a few inches away. The weather continued to improve as I hiked along, but I did not trust it. I kept my chamois shirt, long pants and rain pants on my body and the rain cover on my backpack. For the entire day, the weather alternated between deteriorating and improving conditions. A few drops of rain finally fell upon me as I rested at Bradley's View, a spot at about the halfway point of today's hike with fine views eastward into North Carolina. After I left Bradley's View, the weather improved steadily. I was finally compelled to stop 3 miles later in Copper Gap and strip down to my shorts and t-shirt. While I was there, I had a pitiful lunch from my dwindling supplies. 1 package of unreconstituted freeze-dried peaches, 1 cup of Tang, 5 crackers and 3 teaspoons of sugar. When I had finished, I was still so desperately hungry that my leather hiking boots were looking fairly edible. Be that as it may, if I ever wanted to someday eat again, I had no choice but to tackle the steep 1-mile climb up Mount Sequoia, which followed. The trail elevation was hovering around 6,000 feet all day, and the altitude was beginning to take its toll on my run-down body. I was feeling played out, even though I'd covered 9 relatively easy miles up to that point. I trudged and trudged up Mount Sequoia, and that simple climb seemed endless. I knew from the trail's description in the guidebook that I had this 1 mile climb, a 7/10 of a mile descent into Chapman Gap, a very steep 7/10 of a mile ascent of Mount Chapman, a very steep 7/10 of a mile descent to Big Cove Gap, and a final 2/10 of a mile climb ahead of me before reaching the next shelter. I was absolutely dreading that climb up Mount Chapman. I was dizzy and disoriented from hunger, altitude and simple exhaustion, and still that initial mile up Mount Sequoia just would not end. Although nearing the end of my rope, I refused to stop and rest until Chapman Gap. Finally, the trail began to descend. Although I could barely lift my feet, I kept plugging away. I met 2 hikers coming from the opposite direction on the trail. Somehow I managed to ask them, "How far is it to the beginning of the climb up Mount Chapman?" "You mean this isn't Chapman?" An equally exhausted hiker replied. It turned out that we each had great news for the other. I was able to inform them that they were almost at the top, and I learned that I had already climbed Chapman, and the shelter was less than a mile away. In a fatigued stupor, I had not noticed the mild descent from Sequoia, and thus had merged the 2 climbs into one. No wonder that 1 damn mile had seemed so long. I staggered into Tri-Corner Knob Shelter at 4:30 p.m., tired and discouraged after a 12.3 mile day. Remember, I'd begun hiking the Appalachian Trail 18 days earlier in the worst condition of my life. I was carrying 30 extra pounds on top of my body's customary 195, smoking 2 packs of cigarettes a day and getting no exercise. Although more than 10 of those extra pounds were already gone and I'd quit smoking, there's been a severe price to pay for my rapidly returning physical conditioning, and that bill has come due here in the Smokies. I sadly underestimated the detrimental effects that altitude and this mountain range's notoriously bad weather would have on my body when I figured out my necessary food supply for this stretch of trail. That miscalculation has added to the effects of slow starvation to the mix of the recipe that I like to call what went wrong in the Smokies. They say that what does not destroy us makes us stronger, but I've cut that line extremely close here, and the outcome remains shrouded in doubt. While the question of whether my body ultimately collapses or emerges stronger from this ordeal hangs in the balance, I'm beginning to feel good about what is happening to my mind. Last winter, when I finally admitted to myself that I've always been a quitter and that I've always followed the advice of that small voice in my mind which tells me just to give up when things get too tough, I decided to take action. To paraphrase John F. Kennedy, I chose to make this 2,138.5 mile hike, not because it is easy, but because it is hard. Lately, I'm becoming impressed with what I've been able to drive this massive quivering flesh to accomplish. If I make it to Davenport Gap and continue, this will be the first great turning point of this adventure and possibly my finest hour. If I can somehow reverse the years of defeat and beat that little voice long enough to reach Katahdin, this adventure could be the one great turning point of my life. Hey, it's just a walk in the woods, right? There's really nothing riding on all of this. I have this image that I've created in my mind. I take it out and look at it sometimes when things look dark and bleak and I know that I cannot continue. I've never been within 100 miles of the northern terminus of the Appalachian Trail on the summit of Mount Katahdin in Maine, but I have a blurred, unreal image of it in my mind. There's a campground in Baxter State Park, about 10 miles from the summit, where most thru-hikers spend their last night on the trail before the final ascent and journey's end. It's called Daisy Pond Campground. Of course, I've never been there either, but I can picture it in my mind's eye. In my little tableau, I'm standing next to the pond, staring across the water and over the surrounding evergreen forest toward the naked granite summit of my dream mountain. The sun has already set from my vantage point, but its last fleeting rays are crowning that summit with a rich golden alpenglow. As I stand there, I know that I will climb that mountain the following day, that my quest has been successful, and that, after years of being a quitter and a loser, I have succeeded at the hardest thing that I have ever attempted. And so, in my darkest hours, I can take that picture out and look at it. I can feel the elation of that moment of victory. I can taste it. Tears come into my eyes. I wipe them away. Tell that little voice to go f*** itself and trudge on for a few more miles. And so I go on, driven by a deep longing for an imaginary moment that seems a million miles away. 1,919.4 more miles to go. 14.7 miles to Devonport Gap.